Today we're going to be pruning fruit trees, peach trees, apple trees, and pear trees. Now starting in mid-February up to and including bloom time is the best time to be pruning fruit trees. Actually, bloom time is actually the best because the tree is actively growing. Any cuts that you make will heal very quickly at that point in time. But any time from late winter, which is about mid-February on, after your coldest freezes are over, you can start pruning your fruit trees. Now we're going to start off with a young peach tree. This one is coming into its third growing season. Now for a peach tree, you want to develop the main trunk and then 3 main scaffolds and keep an open center for the light to come in. Now this tree we've been training ever since it's been in the ground. We've been spread the branches. We've pruned out to just simple scaffolds, and when you look at it, it really needs very minimal pruning this year. We just have a few maintenance cuts to make to correct a few mistakes that before they become serious. But one thing I want to stress is that especially on a young tree, if you start training, pay attention right from the start, your job as far as pruning later on is going to be much less. So if you just get at it from the start, much less problem pruning. Now just a few things, a couple of cuts down the bottom. There's a little branch back here that's not doing anything. We have one branch coming right up the middle, one shoot, starting to fill up our open center. We want to get rid of that. We've got one shoot that's starting to grow back up into the middle. We're going to get rid of that so we can keep this scaffold growing in an outward direction. Over on this other side, we have 2 problems starting, one here and one here. And what we have are 2 narrow crotches. They're going to form a weak point, and as this branch gets a heavy crop on it, or you get into an ice storm, it's going to spread apart and it's going to form a weak point where you can end up breaking it. So what we're going to do is right now, before we've invested much time and growth in it, we're going to get rid of that one, and we're going to come around and get rid of this other. Now we've made 5 cuts, and that's about all we're going to make on this young tree. On young trees, you want to do a minimal amount of pruning as you can get by with to maintain a correct form. Whenever you prune the tree, you're stunting it slightly. If you do heavy pruning, especially on a young tree, you're going to heavily stunt it, prevent it from getting larger as fast, prevent it from coming into bearing as quickly. So on a young tree, do minimal pruning, just what you need to correct. And if you start from the beginning and train it right, the pruning cuts that you'll need to do are minimal. Let's go look at how to prune a larger peach tree. There are several reasons why you're pruning peach trees, one of which is to control the size, to keep the height down, and to keep the width within bounds. If you get the branches growing out too far, with the heavy weight of the crop way out on the end of the branch, that can split the branch. If you keep the crop concentrated more closely to the trunk of the tree on a larger scaffold, shorter scaffold, it's stronger, less likely to break out on you. Also, you're pruning to maintain good light distribution within the tree. We talked about an open center, and also you want to be thinning out branches so that you get light down inside the tree. Probably one of the biggest reasons for pruning the peach trees is to maintain the vigor of the tree. Now, if you look at these fat buds on this branch, these are the flower buds. This is what's going to be this year's crop. And those flower buds are only born on last year's growth. On good, vigorous growth, such as we have here, you'll have dozens of flower buds. On shorter, non-vigorous, stunted growth, you'll have very few blossoms, and they'll be a lot weaker. So you want to prune enough to get, if you have 12 to 15 inches average growth on last year's wood, you're doing fine. and you want to prune and make sure that you have that vigor. Now in this peach tree, it's about seven or 8 years old. You can tell for one thing, it's much bigger than the younger tree that we just came from. It still has the good framework, has the short trunk, and you can still see the basic scaffold system. It is now getting to the point where it's getting too tall. We need to start doing some maintenance pruning on keeping it shorter. Whatever you can do to keep all of your operations, such as pruning, thinning, picking, spraying, keep them on the ground, so you do them from on the ground, rather than get up on a ladder. It's much safer, and it's also a lot quicker. For one thing, we've got this one branch. Most of the fruiting wood on it is way too tall. It's way up where you can't get to it easily. It's also blocking out the middle of our open center system. So this is going to be one of our major cuts. Let's get rid of this branch right here. Coming back, we've got another fairly major large branch. Again, it's getting too tall. We need to thin that out. We also are going to need to do some thinning out cuts on some of the medium-sized branches, again, to bring the height down. On our more fine pruning, we have a few branches that are way down low. As the fruit gets on them, they're going to bend down to the ground. Get rid of these low-hanging branches. They're not very vigorous. We also have on the inside, a lot of very short, non-vigorous wood. So we're going to thin out some of that too. But first things first, let's get started on this large one. Just these two cuts have done quite a bit to open up the center of our tree. Now the next step is to make a few thinning out cuts, some major thinning out cuts in the top to try and get our height down. Well, now we've got the centers opened up, the height is reduced. The next thing we want to take care of are these low-hanging branches. We've taken off almost half the wood of this tree in the course of pruning it. A mature peach tree, it's not uncommon to take off that much. You don't want to prune any more severely than that, or you'll get too much vigorous non-productive growth. Now, there are several places on this tree where I really would like it to be shorter, but because it was so tall, we're going to have to do this in stages. We'll get it down a little bit, then next year we can prune it down to get it even shorter. If you have a very overgrown tree, that's something important to remember. You can't get it back into shape usually just in 1 year. It's going to be a 2 or 3 year process, and you're going to have to do it in stages and just kind of plan ahead and be patient with the tree. Now, if you remember with the pruning peach trees, first thing you need to do is get rid of any dead or broken wood in there. Open up your center, lower your height, do any thinning cuts that you need to do to get rid of competing branches, any dead small wood, and then any fine adjustments that you need to make, and that should be it. Just remember to try and prune to keep your shape, to keep your size down, and to get your light into the interior of the tree. Apples and pears, like peaches, need annual pruning to maintain a healthy tree and maintain good fruiting. However, they have a totally different fruiting habit, so you have to prune the trees differently. Now, if you recall, on the peaches, all the fruit buds were born on last year's wood. On apples and pears, the fruiting buds, these fat ones, are on short spurs, which are on 2-year-old or older wood. So actually, the young growth, the current season's growth from last year, does not have any fruiting wood on it. What you need to do is maintain your older wood in healthy condition to keep those spurs in good condition so that they'll keep growing and producing fruit, and just maintain enough vigor to keep the tree healthy. If you put too much vigor into the tree, what you get is a lot of rank growth and a very unproductive tree. Now, another major difference in how you prune apples and pears from peaches is that you use a central leader system. Now, if you notice, we've got a main trunk, central trunk, just going right up the middle, and then we have on the bottom, we have several, in this case about 4 major scaffolds that are coming out at a good angle and growing out. There's kind of a space in between, and there's another set of scaffolds about halfway up, then kind of a brushy top. Now, the lower scaffolds are going to be wider than the middle scaffolds, and the middle scaffolds wider than the top. So what you should end up with is kind of a Christmas tree shape. This will let the light into practically all parts of the tree, maintain good productivity throughout the tree. Well, first thing we're going to do is get rid of a few of the suckers that are coming up from the bottom, and then we'll work on the lower scaffolds. Now, this tree was pruned a couple of years ago. It's several years old. At that time, the pruning on it had been badly neglected. This is a red delicious tree. Red delicious especially tends to have a lot of upright growing branches, and each branch wants to be that central leader. It takes a lot of work to get it into shape, to get it to have outward growing branches. We made a start a couple of years ago. Now, what we need to do now is work again at convincing these side branches to stay growing outwards, whereas this one here, you can see a lot of it is starting to grow up, competing with the top, and that will have to come out. And here again, eventually we'd like to get this worked down so that this side branch would only come out this height, but for the time being, we're going to have to settle for getting this top part out. Just at least get rid of the parts that are growing the most upright. A little more work on our scaffolds over here. We've got a quite a few were left because there was a lot of wood we took off. We didn't take off all the branches. They really needed to come off, but we'll take them out now. A lot of extra wood. And we can, as I said, over on the peach trees, if you have a neglected tree, it's going to take a 2 or 3 year period to get it cleaned up. And we're basically in the secondary phase of a cleanup on this tree. Okay, and start working around the back. We'll take out a few more, then we'll come back and thin out the middle. Okay, now that we've gotten the lower scaffolds pruned sort of outwards and behaving more like scaffolds and less like central leaders, the next step is to come on the inside and prune out these vigorous growing sprouts that are growing up in the center, clogging the light, keeping it from getting down into the middle. Now, first of all, you may notice these branches, and they may look a little funny to you. After we came in and pruned this tree up 2 years ago, whenever you prune severely, you can expect a lot of vigorous growth, a lot of water sprouts. These are vigorous growing, upright shoots, very non-productive. What we did was that after they had grown about 12, 18 inches, we came back and pruned them back to about 6 inches. And then as they branched out, we kept pinching them back. This way, it forced the growth out into several growing points instead of just one, and allowed many of those growing points to become slow growing enough to start forming fruiting spurs. And so what we have as a result, we still have some vigorous shoots that we have to remove, but once those are removed, we also have a base of many fruiting spurs that also will be growing points. And because they are growing points, some may grow a little more vigorously, but they will help suppress the growth of more water sprouts and help control the overly vigorous growth. So the next step, what I'm going to do now, is clean out all this vigorous growth. We've gotten the inside, all those vigorous sprouts cleaned up, and so now light can get in all the way in through the interior of the tree. We've also, up on the top, there were several branches all growing vigorously upright. We've pruned back most of them to a weaker side branch and just left the very top as the central leader in order to keep that, maintain that central leader system, keep the rest of it non-vigorous. Now, the next step, final step, notice we got the lower scaffolds coming out this far, and this one of our middle set of scaffolds is growing out too far. We need to keep it back shorter to keep it from shading out our lower scaffolds. So we're going to cut it back to a less vigorous side shoot, both sides. Keep it shorter, keep it from overtaking the bottom. And with that, we're done with apples. Let's go look at pears. As I've mentioned before, pears have much the same fruiting habit as apples, with the fruiting buds on short side spurs on second year and older wood, and you want to prune them very much like you do apple trees. That's the central leader system, and with your sets of scaffolds, your lowest scaffolds, middle scaffolds, and then kind of a brushy top. Now, pear trees have the very bad habit of growing very upright. And unless you're careful, what you end up with is just a bunch of branches growing very much upright, very close together, very little way for light to get inside. Now this pear tree is one that we pruned 2 years ago, and it hadn't been shaped well before. It had many, as I said, many upright stems. What we started pruning it for then was to start getting our lower scaffolds. We did quite a bit of spreading, and because we were removing quite a bit of wood, we didn't take out all of the wood that we might have wanted to. We had to do it in stages. Basically, what we're coming back and doing today is the second stage of reshaping this tree. And you notice there are several of these branches. This is one over here. There's a couple of them in back that we cut back halfway to a side branch. It's kind of a compromise measure to get this upper part cleared up, but still leave them so we didn't remove too much wood. One of the first things we're going to do today is remove most of these to get them out of the way as a second step, and then do a little bit of cleaning up on our water sprouts. Now I've made 3 major cuts down below to get rid of those 3 branches that we had cut back by half. And the only other major cut that we're going to make is right here. This one scaffold we spread last time, and we're going to remove the spreader. It's long since served its purpose. The spreader really only needs to be in there about 6 months. Next thing I want to do is I want to cut it off here. We've got a pretty good angle middle scaffold here. This upper part is interfering with the development of the top. So we're just going to remove this upper part of the branch. And like I said, that's our last major cut that this tree needs. The rest of what we need to prune off are just getting rid of the vigorous water sprouts. Let's get to that. We've removed all of the vigorous shoots, either removed them or pruned them back to a non-vigorous spur side shoot. We've also taken and cleaned up the top where there were several shoots competing with each other. We've pruned it back, them out, so there is just one single leader. Now, whenever you come in and make cuts, especially a bench cut like we did here, which is a cut on the top side of a branch, you're going to get vigorous regrowth. You're going to get some suckers or water sprouts coming up out of there. The best way to deal with them is to come back with some summer pruning like I described on the apples. Wait, let them grow out until the base starts becoming darker colored, semi-woody, then cut them back to about 3 or 4 leaf length and keep pinching back the shoots, the side shoots as it comes out. This way you'll make them form spurs. And that way you won't always get vigorous water sprouts coming out of it. I'm talking about cuts, and this goes in general for all the fruits, actually any woody plant at all. When you're making a large cut, don't make it flush and back to the trunk. You want to cut it back where what's called the branch collar. It's just where the branch is starting to flare out and join onto the main trunk. This leaves, number one, a smaller surface to heal over, and also it helps the tree heal better. This section Right in here is where the tree is naturally going to try and heal and where it heals best. If you cut it back flush with the trunk, you don't heal as well. So remember to cut back just to the collar. That also goes for any small branches. If you look at any small twigs, you'll also see the branch collar at the base. Don't cut into the collar, cut just above it.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.